An amazing archive of over 130 films made at the start of the 20th century and stored in a garage has been restored and saved by the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. Enter a world of fantasy, romance, exotic lands and vivid reality. The Marvellous Corricks, a talented family of musical entertainers from New Zealand, first toured these silent films in the early 1900s. The films were uncovered in a garage in the Australian state of Tasmania many years later. Some of the oldest films in the world, thought lost, have now been found and restored. It's a window into life, over 100 years ago.
The Corrick family entertainers were a troupe of 10, Albert and Sarah the parents, and 8 children.
Albert called himself Professor and taught Alice, Gertrude, Amy, Ethel, Ruby, Jessie and Elsie many instruments, including violin, piano and mellophone. He helped his son Leonard to become a clarinet, saxophone and kinematograph expert.
I am Leonard Corrick, one of their family of 7 girls and 1 boy. I know what you will be thinking about that. However, we all got on fine together, great pals with each other and no favouritism.
The Corricks were known as and advertised as the Marvellous Corricks, and it usually had a little piece underneath it and Leonard's beautiful pictures. In general, that was their introduction, the Marvellous Corricks, the Corrick family of musicians, of entertainers, etc., etc. But they made sure that people knew virtually what to expect. And they got it. Leonard Corrick was my father, and he was very keen on mechanical instruments as well as playing his clarinet. But if any mechanical necessities were needed, he was the one that came and attended to it.
I understand that the Corricks incorporated film into their show in the 1890s when they were touring around New Zealand, and that Leonard was responsible for the projection and looking after the films at that time, which he must have been around about 14, I think, something like that, which is very young. It's an incredible responsibility because they would have had to have made oxygen and lit limelight, and it was very dangerous, and there could be explosions, and in fact all around the world there were regularly theatres going up in flames.
The Corricks toured from the early 1900s until 1914. In Australia, they performed everywhere, from the Bark Hut in Torrington, a mining town, right through to grand city halls. They played almost every night, including many Sundays. In some towns, they brought electricity for the first time. By 1907, the Corricks were attracting mass audiences, photographed here at Adelaide Town Hall. The next day, Albert sent a telegram. Concert last night, immense success. Over 4,000 present. This morning's papers, very eulogistic. All well, Albert Corrick. The Corrick children grew up on the road. They found fame and fortune, but it was non-stop touring with little time for rest or romance. Leonard started making his own films, inviting the public to be in the picture. He shot street scenes in Perth in the morning with this bioscope camera, developing and screening it that night using this Pathé Frère projector.
It was very typical at the time when a travelling troupe came into a town, and if they had a camera, they would announce in the local paper that they were going to be in such and such a corner and take a film. And they wanted people to turn up. Well, everybody turned up. Everyone would be in the film.
People would come up to the mechanician and his camera and say, "What are you doing there, mate?" And mate would say, "Well, I'm just filming people in the main street here, and if you'd like to come along to our show tonight, you'll see yourself on the screen." "Oh, will we?" And of course that was a means of swelling the audience in their show.
There's a lovely, lovely moment where the camera is looking up, I think it's Hay Street, and three women cross the road and they turn in synchronisation and look back at the camera. And this looked to me to be too good to be true, and in fact it's three of the Corrick daughters who turn and look back at Leonard, who's running the camera. The next shot is of the big crowd, and at the back is a man who's he's just really looking at the camera and he's waiting for a cue to start a fight, right? Which he does, and he biffs probably, someone else from the troupe. At least I expect it's someone else from the troupe. He biffs them and they start a fight. Well, of course, this is the best thing that they could have done, because everyone follows it and it goes up the street and the crowd's all behind it, and then the film ends and that's it.
I'm in the Albert Hall in the Corricks' hometown, Launceston, and what is really hitting me here, seeing it for the first time, is that this kind of a space was what the Corricks filled with ease. An audience of 1,000 was common, it might be higher over time. Their mixture of culture, refinement and entertainment was successful with the masses for years and years and years.
In 1907, the Marvellous Corricks embarked on their grand world tour, travelling and performing in Sri Lanka and many Indian cities, in Pakistan near the Khyber Pass, Malaysia, Singapore, Burma, Sumatra and England. They returned to Australia in 1909.
A scrapbook full of reviews from all over the world throughout the tour is one of the tools that the Corricks used to promote themselves. There are quotes of all sorts about how fabulous the performances were, and one of the beauties is from Ceylon in 1907. The Corricks know how to advertise and how to boom their own show, and what is always a practical test, how to justify the high expectations which have been formed for them. The whole business about the Corricks actually pre-selling themselves is the go. So there you can actually see, one, the story in the raw, but two, also how the Corricks themselves really made their own history by making sure that their story either went out in advance of their own travels, or it was being kept partly by themselves through the years, even when it was just sitting in the garage waiting to be rediscovered.
In Leonard's photographs, their lives look glamorous and theatrical. A romance blossomed between Ethel the comedienne and Harold Coulter, the troupe's tour manager. But Ethel had to wait 3 years to get married. 3 of the girls never married. The Marvellous Corricks is a tale of love and loss, and personal dreams sacrificed to keep the family show on the road.
When our family company was touring England and played at the Woolwich Hippodrome, the Black Watch military band was on the same program with us. After I played my rather difficult clarinet solo, the bandmaster approached my father and asked for me to join his band. But that was not possible, as it would have broken up our family combination.
After 14 years on the road, the Corricks disbanded. The children were adults and the entertainment industry was changing. Most of the family settled in Launceston in 1914.
It's coincidental that that is when World War I started, but it's actually driven primarily by the death of Albert, the father. He does seem to have been the driving force behind the troop continuing as long as it did. And there was the other factor that by this stage a couple of the daughters had married and their lives were beginning to move down different paths. Seeing the home that the Corricks retired to when the troop finally left the road in Launceston really highlighted the fact that they were significantly successful. After 14 years touring around, they had the resources to buy into a magnificent terrace in the posh part of Launceston. So what you're seeing there is, I suppose, the message that entertainment did pay, even in those days. We're standing in the stalls of the Princess Theatre in Tasmania, where Leonard Corrick was part of the music orchestra that supported silent cinema in the 1920s, in the heyday of silent film. This was after those many years of touring with the Marvellous Corricks entertainers, and allowed Leonard to be part of cinema right up to the real demise of silent screen at the end of the 20s. With the impact that the Corrick films are having today, one of the best examples in really recent times is the artistic work that Legs on the Wall, a physical performance company, actually produced. What they really did was interpret, they responded to what they were seeing and created something that's entirely different, but which still used and recognised the Corrick source material as their inspiration. And when it was premiered in Sydney, we had the good fortune to have John Corrick and his wife Marge there. And John, as the last sort of surviving person with a direct connection to that vintage, was absolutely thrilled seeing something so different and so modern being done with the films, partly because that was what the Corrick family entertainers were doing in their age with the films themselves. So John was seeing, a new vintage really starting to get inspired by something that his family had initiated a century ago.